Hello, everybody. Welcome to Music Meltdown. I've done this like twice in the past 6 months, so that's cool. Today we're tackling a band that like maybe 14 of you know in the US. Talking about Japan, art rock, kind of new wavy group, fronted by David Sylvian. They're fine. I don't have any real impression on this group. Patrick, how do you feel? Sport?
Well, I like Japan. I think they have a roller coaster of a catalog, but when they hit their highs, they're really high. I really enjoy a few of their albums tremendously, and some of their albums I think are lightweight, and I usually don't return to for listening pleasure, but I came back to do this ranking just to, and one of them did grow on me a little bit. But overall, I think uh, they were an interesting band. They had some amazing musicians in the group. Mick Karn is an amazing bass player. In fact, he's quite the polymath. He also plays woodwinds. He plays saxophone. He was classically trained, and along with bands like Chic, you can see the influence of Japan on bands that followed, especially Duran Duran, um, some of the early 80s new wave and new romantic bands. Japan sort of laid a blueprint down for that. And David Sylvian, of course, I think out of all of them is the best well known from the group and had probably the most successful solo career out of the group. But the group was filled with really, really good musicians. Songwriting, it varies. It's not consistent, but when they're hitting on all cylinders, they're a fantastic band and to listen to. And so I enjoy them.
All right, cool. My history with Japan is strange. Back when I was 17, I inherited my great aunt's car. It was my first car, a Chevy Impala, which is an absolute boat. I could tell stories about this car. But anyway, I had a friend who was dealing with family issues and had to be relocated across town. And I drove him around quite a bit that day. To show his appreciation, he gave me a tape of Japan's Quiet Life. I had never heard of them before, and it was like a dispatch from the underground. I did listen to that tape quite a bit, and I think it has survived after all these years, but I couldn't find it. I was looking around for it recently. It's probably around here somewhere, or maybe in my parents' garage. I never heard anything else by the band until a few years later when a friend of mine put a few songs from Gentlemen Take Polaroids on a mixtape. At some point, I heard Tin Drum and then didn't pursue the band further. Finally, sometime in the age of streaming, I caught up with Japan and filled in all the remaining holes. At this point, I consider myself a casual fan. And I have actually been a pretty big David Sylvian fan since back when I was a teen in the 80s, to be precise, since 1987 when Secrets of the Beehive came out, and that was the same year that kid gave me the Japan tape.
Makes sense. All right, I'll kick this off. I suppose to clarify, we are counting 6 records here. There were 5 formal records by under the name Japan, and the worst record of theirs, which is by the name Rain Tree Crow, which is essentially just them reformed as Japan. This record kind of stinks. This is a really big letdown for me. Obviously, I'm a huge Bebop Deluxe fan, and Bill Nelson was heavily influenced with this. I'm not super familiar with Bill Nelson's solo career, but from what I understand, it's almost a bit like new agey and more experimental at points, which you could say that he's doing here. And as such, the songs are not very interesting. I don't think it really goes anywhere, truthfully. They don't build or develop into some super interesting point. And because it's a far more instrumentally focused record, you don't really get any hooks or anything drawing you into it. I thought it was just kind of a drag being around 50 minutes. I gave it 2.5 stars. I don't think that there's much really to go back to off this one. So, you tried.
Not
Okay.
surprising.
Yeah. So my the lowest on my list is going to be obscure alternatives. I think it's a regression and a pretty drastic regression from their debut album, which I enjoy. And it grew on me after revisiting their catalog here for this. But here they lost a lot of their R&B and funk influence, and they've gone straight towards a very, I guess, middle of the road post-punk sound. The songs just aren't that strong. It's got David Sylvian at his snottiest, I'd say, vocally wise. He's doing his David Bowie here, a strong David Bowie impersonation almost. And I think this is why there was such derisive criticism against Japan early on because of that Bowie influence. There's also, being post-punk, there's also some Sex Pistols here, but even stronger, something like Adam and the Ants or Susie and the Banshees, I hear in here. But I would prefer to listen to either Adam or Susie over this album. It's also it has some blatantly offensive language in it. And within context, I understand it. Um, but it's not, it's not it's almost like trying to carry on this punk attitude when I don't buy it. It's not really there. And it's such a regression from their debut album. Such a disappointment. I think that's partly why I've got it ranked so low. I've got it at 2.5 stars. I'd say the only really decent songs on here is Love is Infectious and I like Suburban Berlin. But there again, Bowie was doing his Berlin trilogy at the same time here. I think that really had, an influence on David Sylvian's vocal mannerisms. Um, and this would be the last time he also sang with this sort of snarl or just this snotty white boy attitude, trying to bring in some punk, I think. He changes on the next album after this. It's just not one I make repeated visits to, and it's just one I ignore in their catalog. Um, so I give it like 2.5 stars. It's okay, but it's just not that good.
Right, well, this will be interesting. My bottom number six is Tin Drum from 1981, their fifth album. I don't care much for this one at all. I don't like the sound. It is innovative and unique, but that doesn't mean it's good. One music critic referred to it as mannered cubist pop, and that sounds like a good description to me. The music sounds very boxy. If it took a physical form, it would be stacks of boxes. Right off the bat, opening track, The Art of Parties, sounds dorky and cheesy to me and a bit awkward. I don't think Sylvian's vocals mesh with this track very well either. I feel the same way about the following track, Talking Drum. It sounds hollow, artificial, and dorky. Next, we got Ghosts, which is a very odd choice for a single with its minimal ambient textures, but I actually think it's really good. It's my favorite on the album. It also points the way toward the direction David Sylvian would go in his subsequent solo work. There are some cool sounds on some of these songs, some trippy effects, but by and large, I am not turned on by the proceedings. Some of these songs have that electronic clapping sound that came into use during the 80s. I'm not crazy about that. I really only like that percussion sound on The Baby Screams by The Cure. The chorus to Still Life in Mobile Homes goes plant life, my life, still life in mobile homes. And it's funny to imagine a Van Halen fan coming across that and thinking it's the dorkiest lyric ever. The lyrics about 20th century China may be good, but they don't hold my interest in this setting. It's funny because this album is widely considered to be their best, yet I have no desire to ever return to it again, save for maybe the track Ghosts. 2.5 stars.
I will get there shortly.
Oh,
However, I'm not quite at the bottom for it. I too was rather disappointed by it. I apologize, Patrick. I have a feeling you really like that one. Number five for me. I agree with you. I have obscure alternatives. This is a huge letdown compared to the debut, in my opinion. I think it just starts out really terribly. I think Automatic Gun and Rhodesia are just really bad songs. Love is Infectious, I think is fun, and sometimes I feel low keeps the pace nicely, but I just don't really feel much from the rest of the track listing. Outside of the excellent track Suburban Berlin, it's clear as a band they're trying to find their sound, and it just ends up feeling incomplete. They drop pretty much all of the funk and grooviness that they had before and trade it out for a super generic post-punk sound, which I don't think works. And you can tell heavily this band is just super influenced by the Berlin era of Bowie. They pretty much started doing on every album, just having just a couple different attempts at doing the Eno side too, which never really fits in, but like they're oftentimes my favorite thing that the band did. So I guess that says a lot for how I feel about David Sylvian as a frontman. I don't know. This record is just a huge letdown in comparison to that debut, which I thought was fairly interesting. I'm at 3 stars for it. I think it's fine, but still nothing really to write home about.
Yeah, I agree with that. Um, my let's see, this would be number five on the list is going to be Quiet Life. But this is a step up from obscure alternatives. It's a big step up. This is where Sylvian starts singing in that baritone voice, and he stops imitating Bowie and he starts imitating Brian Ferry here. And it even gets more so on the next couple of albums after this. But you can definitely hear Roxy music here. And there is a change in their approach to songwriting. There's a change in their approach to either staying with this post-punk theme or going more new wave and even art rock, which they do with this album. They this is the first album I think where they had some hit singles. Although I'm not sure their debut may have as well, but I know that Quiet Life was a pretty big single in the UK. They do a cover of All Tomorrow's Parties, which I actually like. They take it and they change it. I still like the Velvet Undergrounds. I still like Lou Reed better, but it's decent. It's good. Fall in Love with Me, I think, is a good tune on here. Alien, I really like. The Other Side of Life sort of drags on a little bit, but it's an interesting song. I do think that it was here where they just got rid of the glam affectations and went into the sort of more of a pop, art rock genre, and really brought in the synthesizers, put them at the forefront. So Richard Barbieri, who went on to play with Porcupine Tree, was their keyboardist and synth player, and he starts to shine here. The standout on this album, I think, though, is Mick Karn's bass playing. He picks up and plays primarily now fretless bass here, and he is incredible. Mick Karn is an incredible bass player. In fact, when I first heard Japan, that's what stood out to me. It wasn't the songs, it wasn't Sylvian's voice, it was Mick Karn. He is an amazing bass player, really influential. Um, I know that Taylor, the bass player for Duran Duran, he's a huge influence on him. Is it John Taylor, I think? I can't remember his first name. And it's also here where you can hear Duran Duran start pulling from Japan, especially their first album with Girls on Film, Planet Earth. It's very Japan derivative, and it's this album I think that must have had a big influence on um, Nick Rhodes and Duran Duran in general because you can just hear it. Um, but I think this is a good album. I give this 3.5 stars. Quiet Life, Fall in Love with Me. It's a great two. It's a great two-song opener for this album. Halloween is also very good. It keeps it sort of is a more cohesive album certainly than their previous two, and it's worth a listen. They're almost there. It's certainly a transitional album, but it doesn't quite get there for me yet. It will after this album, but I really appreciate the change in approach in songwriting. I'm sure that they probably had pressure from their label to come up with something, come up with a clear single that would sell and push this album. And Quiet Life, I think, was that single. So it's good, not great, but good. And I think it's going to get better from here, as far as Japan is concerned, for me.
All right. Well, I think we've got some radically different opinions in the house. Um, my number five is Rain Tree Crow from 1991, their sixth album. And yeah, I get thinking this is boring, but I do like it. I like the direction the band takes with this one. It's got more in common with David Sylvian's solo work than previous Japan albums, more ambient and atmospheric. This is a very chill record, much of it developed through improvisation. There's some cool drum beats, and bassist Mick Karn impresses on bass clarinet, which appears on three tracks. Yeah, he is an incredibly talented guy. Um, a few of the songs come to a dead stop right in the middle. That's a dramatic effect. Nothing on this album blows me away, but it's a pleasant listen, so I'm going 3.5 stars. It's good.
All right. Well, glad to see that near the bottom for another one. Number four for me. Sorry, Patrick. I have Tin Drum. I wish I could really pinpoint down why I wasn't resonating with this record, but I don't know. I think that there's a clear shift in direction. They're very clearly taking cues from Roxy Music, as you noted earlier. I didn't immediately note Brian Ferry, but yeah, he's definitely aping Brian Ferry a bit. The songs are fine, but none really stand out too much for me. I just didn't really get the punch or the energy on this one in comparison to some of their other releases. And with this being the final record before they ended up breaking up for a bit, I kind of just get the sense they were burnt out. They were basically releasing a record every year, so it just sort of is what it is. I think the closer, Cantonese Boy, is pretty great. That was easily my favorite on here. But outside of that, I just was not resonating with this. I went 3 stars for Tin Drum. Didn't much care for it.
Yeah, yes, there was discontent within the band. When I get to this album, I'll mention that, some of the backstory. But there was, yeah, they were not getting along, and you're dead on that one. Okay, so my number four is going to be, or excuse me, number three. Is that right? Yes, number three is going to be Rain Tree Crow. So I'm not too
Wait,
far off.
we're doing four.
This is one, two, three. This is we've got six altogether, right?
Yeah.
Scare Alternatives, Quiet Life. Yeah, this is my next one, Rain Tree Crow. So this would be, yes, I'm sorry, number four. Yep. Um, this one I don't have much to add. Sorry, what did I say? Three. Sorry. This one don't have much to add from what's already been said. It is very ambient. It's amazing they were able to get back together to produce anything at all, because there was such discontent among band members after they broke up post 10 Drum. But they did, and I think it's a very atmospheric album. There's, I wouldn't Blackwater. There's some good tracks in here, but I wouldn't call them necessarily fully formed songs. This album as a whole is a mood piece, and it is very laconic. It is, it can be sleepy at times, just because of its ambient nature. And I think Rich mentioned that this was definitely this could have been really a David Sylvian solo album in many ways. Bill Nelson plays on three tracks on this album, and I can definitely see the thread that ties Bill Nelson and Bebop Deluxe along with Japan, especially their early new wave stuff. This is far from it. Um, but they have a lot of kinship in their approach to music, I think. I don't think that there's anything that's necessarily great about this album. I give it again 3.5 stars. I think there's, as a mood piece, as an atmospheric collection of music. And if you like David Sylvian solo, you would probably really enjoy this album from Japan. I think it's the closest to his solo work. Um, but it's still to me not top tier Japan. Um, it's interesting. They still couldn't keep it together to get past this, new name or not. So it was a one-off for them. Um, but it's good, not great. I like it. Um, but we'll get there.
All right. Cool. Yeah, it's good that that's near the bottom for all of us. I think that's where it belongs. Um, anyway, my number four is Gentlemen Take Polaroids from 1980, their fourth album, another fan favorite. There's some great synth sounds on this one. I love the sequencer on Methods of Dance, an album highlight. And the final track, written and recorded with Yellow Magic Orchestra's Ryuichi Sakamoto, sounds amazing. I guarantee you Peter Gabriel creamed over this track. I think the second side of this album is stronger than the first. To be honest, the opening title track doesn't turn me on much. Gentlemen Take Polaroids. I find it a bit sleepy and boring. The oboe is nice. I almost consider this a mad track, except for the fact that there are recognizable Japan elements I do like, such as the cool drums and the fretless bass. Ultimately, it's an okay track. Um, Melanie made a good point about Japan aping Bowie at times. The third track on this album, Burning Bridges, is an ambient synth piece that I feel owes a bit too much to David Bowie's Warzawa. It's decent though, and there's some cool sax, but the rest of the tracks are good to great. Night Porter, in particular, is an excellent melancholy ballad, beautifully sung by Sylvian. Yeah, Patrick talked about their influence on Duran Duran. I think Duran Duran was influenced by this album in particular. And Japan fit in well with the new romantic movement at the time, even if they didn't want to. I'm going 4 stars for Gentlemen Take Polaroids.
Wow. That is certainly low for that record, mind you. I had Tin Can low, so like who cares? But and it's Japan, so who really cares? But still.
Tin Can.
Yes. I don't know. It felt like a tin
Tin
can.
can.
I already forgot what that
Yes.
record sounds like, and I listened to it like 12 hours ago, so who cares?
Uh,
Number three, Adolescent Sex. It's fine. It's a solid debut. It's got good energy to it, blending a little bit of art rock, having a bit of like sort of funk in there, but also new wave energy to it, and a bunch of glam influence. Main issue here, none of the songs are really that great. They're all consistently fine, and like I like the energy and the style that they have, but like at their core, are these genuinely like very interesting songs to me? Not really. They're just pretty solid and fit the style well. I do really like David Sylvian on this though. I like that sort of nasally, more like high-pitched voice. I think that that's a really interesting sound, and I think it would have blended well with their later records. So it's like you didn't have to ape Brian Ferry. You were doing fine aping Bowie. Like if you're gonna ape somebody, like come up with something original at a certain point. I don't know. I think it's fine. It's a 3.5 star record. It's decent enough for what it is, but it's more so showing off that the band has plenty that they could do as opposed to what they're currently doing. So 3.5 stars for Adolescent Sex, my number three.
And that's my number three as well. This album grew on me, though. I think I had just decided that it wasn't that interesting when I first started doing a deep dive into Japan, but this was in the 80s. Um, and it's because I have a particular affinity for these next two albums, and it's so different from that. And then the other thing is, I agree with you that it is, yeah, it's good for a debut, but it is derivative. And I don't think there's anything really original in here, except again for Mick Karn's playing. Boy, and that's because they incorporate a chic influence here with some good funk and R&B along with a bit of new wave and post-punk and even the punk attitude and the snarl and the snot out of David Sylvian's voice. I do find it interesting. I like it. I think it's limited though. I don't think after 3 4 albums of that it would have gotten to me it would have gotten boring and shtick like in a way. I think he was to some degree because his voice was limited, and in particular in his range. I think he was using it as a crutch, but also it has a distinct punk attitude to it. And John Lydon from the Sex Pistols, I think, also has, you can hear some of it in Sylvian, along with Bowie. This, I think, Bowie's Plastic Soul period with Young Americans and Station to Station in particular had an influence on this. And that's where they were pulling that R&B and the soul and the funk influence from. Um, some good songs on here. Transmission is a good opener. Also, the same name. This song has the same name as a Joy Division song, um, and around the same time too. The Unconventional, also very good. Mick Karn's slinky bass playing, really just fantastic. Mick Karn again is the standout on this album. Really like his playing, in particular on the Unconventional and Wish You Were Black. Um, I'm sure I'm sure people hearing that disco-like uh, influence in mix playing here. It stands out. It's really notable. Um, I don't know why they dropped that influence either on their next album because I think it was very successful for them. I'll I would have liked to have heard more of this approach, definitely. Television, I think's also a good tune, although it goes on for over 11 minutes, so it's a little bit long. Um, and there's also some, longish tracks like Suburban Love as well. So the album can drag out a little bit longer than I would like. But the strong tracks on here, the Unconventional in particular, which were Black, the single off of this, Adolescent Sex, is also very good. title track, I like a lot. So I give this 4 stars. I do think it's a good album. But it's gonna go up from here for me. I think it's a good debut. I think it's a good album. Um, yeah, 4 stars for Adolescent Sex.
All right, cool. This is interesting. When we did the last video we did was throwing muses, and we all had for the third place the title track, the debut.
Mm.
And same thing for this one. We've all got Adolescent Sex. Number three, 1978. Um, this is an audacious debut from a hungry young band, and I'm going to repeat some of what Patrick said, but this won't take long. Um, this album and their next one sound very glammy to me. I would even say some of it sounds very proto new romantic with that funky disco bass. Makes you think they've been listening to Chic, as Patrick said. This is a well-made album, and you can tell the band or maybe the producer paid a lot of attention to the detail. Different sounds pop up in different places, a choir here, a piano chord there. The music rocks. It sounds slinky and sexy, and I do think David Sylvian's vocals sound sexy here. In truth, Japan isn't doing anything too different from what the Cars were doing at the same time with their synth and guitars thing. Everything here is pretty damn good, except for the Barbara Streisand cover, Don't Rain on My Parade. That just does not work for me at all. And it's the main reason why this album doesn't rank higher. Um, it is neck and neck with the album that I've placed at number two. Um, I don't think the band themselves were very high on this album. Perhaps they were embarrassed by its over-the-top youthful folly, but I think it has great energy and it's a lot of fun. So I'm all the way up to 4.5 stars. Excellent.
Whoa. All right. Well, let's not get crazy now. I'm on to my number two, which I think is very obviously going to be Rich's number one at this point. I'll be shocked if it's not, which is Quiet Life. I think it's a very solid step forward for the group. They're starting to really come into their own, with more of the funky style being replaced with more of the artistic notes, as well as the glam still being there because, you know, they're Bowie, they're Roxy Music, they're on a little bit of like new wave stuff. There you go, got the band. Starts out really strong with the title track, and I think Fell in Love with Me is really good, and I think it closes really well with The Other Side of Life. Despair, I think it's just all right, and just generally speaking, I don't really connect with covers of The Velvet Underground. Just like be the Velvet Underground. That's gonna be better than you. It's hard to top that, so why bother? I don't have too much to say here. It's just a pretty good sort of art rock record. I don't think that there's anything really especially noteworthy with this band. They're just pretty good. Hey, it's snowing outside. That's fun. So yeah, Quiet Life, 4 stars. It's really solid, but am I gonna listen to this again? I'm gonna be honest, probably not. So there's my number two, Quiet Life.
All right. My number 2 is Gentlemen Take Polaroids. But to me, I think this is it's so near perfect. I just give it a 5 star ranking. I really, really, really enjoy this album. And I think Quiet Life was leading towards this, and they took a huge leap forward with this album. This is where Richard Barbieri in particular comes into the forefront. And Steve Jansen, who is David Sylvian's brother, actually, even though I know they have different surnames. He and Mick Karn just make one incredible rhythm section. They really are, they've brought back funk and soul influence here where it had been lost before, or they had left it behind since their debut. And but they rework it here and they sort of deconstruct it and bring it into a very art pop, art rock format, I think. It's they even take a cover of a Marvin Gaye song, not written by Marvin Gaye, actually written by Smokey Robinson and Prince Moore. Ain't That Peculiar is a big hit for Marvin during Motown, and they just again they sort of deconstruct it here and make it a completely different song. I don't think they take ownership of the song or anything like that or make it their own, but they provide a different approach to the song. I find it fascinating. Rich is right. This was a huge influence on Duran Duran. This and Quiet Life, you can just see it, you can hear it. Um, and when I say you can see it, just judging by the album cover alone and the way that David Sylvian is all glammed up. Nick Rhodes from Nick Rhodes from Duran Duran just basically tried to look exactly like this.
They could be
Ma
twins.
Absolutely. The application, they were blessed with high cheekbones.
Oh yeah.
David Sylvian here was definitely damn near every UK woman wanted to sleep with him. Every UK teenage boy wanted to look like him. To- he was quite the teen. I don't know if you could call him a teen idol, but he was in a way. Surprising, I know. But and he is a beautiful man. He is a very good looking man. He uh he takes on more of a leader approach here with this album, I think, than he did in the past. Probably much to Mick Karn's discontent, but that's the way it goes. And it's here where he also settles into that baritone croon, via, Brian Ferry from Roxy Music, and down to the vibrato, right? He's got, he's aping Brian Ferry here pretty closely. Um, but that's fine. I don't mind that. That doesn't bother me. When the atmosphere, the tone of these songs I find really engaging. And I like I like the title track, not self-title. I like the title track, Gentlemen Take Polaroids. Really like that song. It's got a funky edge to it, but it's still really art rock. Swing is a great second track to the opener here, Gentlemen Take Polaroids. Another 1-2 punch here for this album. Burning Bridges has some Bowie influence on it. You can hear it. My New Career definitely has Bowie Berlin influence on here. But I don't mind when bands are taking their influence, showing their influences on in their music, and yet doing something by extending it. And I do think they do that here. Methods of Dance is very good. Um, Night Porter, I agree with Rich, is just a wonderful song. And Taking Islands in Africa. There's not a song on here that I don't like. And nothing skippable to me. And there's My New Career, which is a bit of an ambient tune here and points the way towards Sylvian's solo career. Um, they had written Taking Islands in Africa. David Sylvian had co-written this with Ruichi Sakamoto from Yellow Magic Orchestra, and it's great. I really love that tune. He also worked with Ruichi for Ghost as well on the next album. And I'm a huge Yellow Magic Orchestra fan and love all three members of YMO. So for him to have Bill Nelson was also working with YMO at the time here as well. So there was this strong new wave early 80s cross pollination that was happening between in the UK and in Japan with bands like YMO, for instance, where they were influencing each other. Just great. I just love this album. I think this and of course, my number one here, I think are so unique in terms of their sound and the way they approached art rock. Richard Barbieri's keyboards are great here. Um, I give this album 5 stars. It's number two, but I really, really, really enjoy Gentlemen Taking Polaroids. Really enjoy this album.
Gentlemen, take
Take hold,
Polaroids. Sorry.
they
Um,
fall
Should have done
in
YMO.
love. Hey,
no,
I'm always open
it's
to
a
doing
very good
YMO.
album.
I'm always open to doing YMO. Yeah. Quit.
Okay. All right. Yeah, my number two. I don't get why y'all guys don't like this more. Obscure Alternatives, their sophomore album, their second album in 1978. This is a damn good record. Once again, it's very glammy, another good mixture of synths and guitars with the occasional horns, piano, and strings. Maybe you don't like the reggae. A few of these tracks have a quasi reggae thing going on, in
Yeah.
particular, Rhodesia.
Rhodesia. Yeah.
Yeah, that gets my vote for best track. I do think it's excellent. The title track is the other one that gets a bit reggae, and the way the synths continuously build sounds fantastic. Um, the final track comes out of left field, completely different from everything else here. It's a mellow, atmospheric, synth-based instrumental that points the way to some of their later work, and I think that's excellent too. Uh, I guess it's considered a transitional album. Whatever. I think it's about neck and neck with Adolescent Sex. I only put Adolescent Sex lower because of Don't Rain on My Parade. So Obscure Alternatives gets the second position, and it's another 4.5 stars.
Yeah, the reggae doesn't work. It's no good. Not a fan.
I
Well,
think, yeah, I think for me it was them leaving behind R&B and disco and funk.
I
Because
mean,
I
I was
really loved that mashup, and for some reason they just dropped it on this album, and I don't know why. Don't know why. Anyway,
I don't know. They picked up reggae, so I mean, I guess they were switching it out. They were giving it the old
I
college
like
attempt.
reggae more than just about everybody in our community, I think.
No, I quite enjoy reggae. I just like it when it's good, not shit. So, number one, I guess I'm the only one with this. Interesting how that played out. Gentlemen Take Polaroids. Since when am I picking the goddamn conventional option? Um, it's another good evolution, even losing a bit more of the new wave sound. At this point, we're almost into a synth pop direction. We've been talking about Duran Duran this whole episode. Well, you guys have. I tried to neglect them after I tried doing a dive, but yeah, they influence them. There you go. That's one point to influences from Japan and not influences that Japan took. So rare circumstance there. I don't know. The band is still growing, but with more instrumental leg cuts being there, and they're still my favorites. There's not a bad song across the runtime. It's just I grapple with this, and we've been talking about it pretty much through this whole episode. How much should a band being original genuinely matter when assessing their music? I don't think that this band ever really does anything all that original. They're either doing the Bowie Berlin period, they're doing like television post-punk sort of thing, or they're attempting these different musical styles that just simply don't really work for them. I think that this is a good record. I think that it's very solid. I'm at 4 stars for it, but I just don't really get much from this group. They're fine, like they're perfectly accessible, but also I just like where I draw most of their parallels to infinitely more. I like the Berlin period infinitely more. I like a lot of the Roxy Music stuff way more. I like Rio by Duran Duran more than any Japan record, for example. It's like I just prefer either what they influenced or their primary influences as to them themselves. So I still do think it's very good. I just wish they did something unique to them at one point. So,
Well,
and
when you hear those influences, do you think, "Oh, that's cool," or does it irk you because it's like, "Oh, I've heard that, but better."
I completely empathetic. It's perfectly fine. I
Okay,
have no
cool.
real grievances one way or another, and I recognize that it is a very solid. However, do I ever want to listen to this over the actual influences themselves? Not really. Like, I'd listen to Low
Hmm.
before I'd listen to Gentleman Takes Polaroids, or I'd listen to Heroes over it.
Hmm.
It just sort of is what it is. I still think that they're a solid group. I just think they did little to really properly differentiate themselves, is my real stance here. Still 4 stars, still quite solid. Anyways,
Yeah,
Patrick, talk about that one
they're
we hated.
they're in an in between sort of. Um, I wouldn't. There's sort of like a in purgatory or an in between state for you, sort of band, and that's completely fine. And there are a lot of those. So. And I don't necessarily disagree with anything you said in terms of your criticisms of Japan. I do think that with these last two albums, they did take it and extended it and ventured off into new areas that they hadn't before. And I think, and so my number one is going to be Tin Drum. Obviously not a popular choice here, but I really love this album. I think, and this is probably, to me, this is the most original that they sounded. I think they were venturing off into different territories and leaving. I think even here, David Sylvian was even leaving behind his Brian Ferry impersonation and trying to find something that he could, either call his own or somewhere where he felt comfortable vocally here. And I think he starts to get to it. He reaches it on his solo albums, but I think here is where he starts. Basically, what happened is that there was a lot of discontent and conflict within the band, and it primarily was because David Sylvian and Mick Karn were very close friends, and Mick Karn's girlfriend left him for David Sylvian and ended up living with David Sylvian for quite a while. I don't think they got married. I don't think the relationship lasted forever, but it was, it definitely was, it
That'll fuck
was
things up.
that
That
will
will fuck
screw
things
things
up.
up. And Mick Karn just he couldn't get over it. And I don't blame him. Here is where I think Mick Karn makes this album, along with Steve Jensen. They are in lockstep as a rhythm section, and I love listening to them play. The Art of Parties is a really good. They bring some funk back in too. They did it with Gentlemen Prefer Polaroids, but they also bring it in here too. But also, there is evocations of Chinese music, Cantonese in particular, um, from the album cover alone through that runs throughout all these songs on here. Richard Barbieri, you can tell his textures. Sometimes they sound like a koto. It's very interesting. And it gives it a lot of atmosphere, of course. It gives it otherworldly influences or other, East Asian in particular. I mean, they name themselves Japan just on a lark because they couldn't think of another name at the time and ended up becoming very successful, surprise, in Japan. But this album has more of a, there's a Chinese bent to it, which I find weird, but interesting. And to me, that always engages my curiosity and interest, and I would like to listen to it more and discover some of the tonal and some of the tonal, what do I want to say? Just the tonal atmosphere of this album, the textures that it brings up. Um, None of these songs, except for Ghosts, I agree with Rich. I think Ghosts is one of the standout tracks on here. None of these songs are you would peg as a single, but they fit nicely into a cohesive piece for this album. Talking Drum, really interesting tune. I love Still Life in Mobile Homes and Visions of China. That was written, David wrote that with his brother Steve Jensen, amazing drummer. And he really shines on here. Sons of Pioneers, David co-wrote with Mick Karn. Um, and Cantonese Boy, I really like. I don't know. This album again is a 5-star album for me. I revisit it often. It was actually their most commercially successful album, believe it or not. Uh, it's it's very it's out of the two words art rock. It's more art than it is rock, but I really I like the sound. I like the cohesive nature to it, but yet all of these different textures that come up with these songs. Um, I don't know. It's it takes Gentlemen. It basically extends on what Gentlemen Take Polaroids did, and uh, and it's a shame that they couldn't continue on at least after this, because I would have been very interested to see where they go. But um, I think to me, they ended on a very strong note. I really like Tin Drum. Um, for such a challenging album, I mean, Rich is right. There's a very angular sound to this. When he talks about stacking boxes, I understand what he means. It's the rhythms are disjointed. They change time signature almost on after every bar. And it can be, it can be challenging to the listener, I think, and off-putting. It's definitely nothing that listeners are used to with typical 4/4 time from Western popular music at the time. Again, very art here, and but I think it's successful. I really really like Tin Drum. I think it's a very good album.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, Patrick. I I probably was a little too harsh on Tin Drum because there are some songs I like. Ghost Canton is pretty good. So I don't know. This is where the guitarist left, right?
Right, right. Richard Barbieri just took over basically on synths. This is where they become a real like synth band.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Anyway, my number one is Quiet Life from 1979. Everything comes together beautifully on this, their third album. The synths are more dominant at this point, but they work so well with the guitars and Mick Karn's delicious, rubbery, fretless bass. Such a distinctive sound, such a distinctive part of the Japan sound. The opening title track kicks off with a tasty sequencer, and soon we hear Sylvian sporting a new lower register croon, the baritone vocal style he is most known for. I adore his voice. The guitar solo, improvised in the studio, is achieved with an EBow, and it sounds fantastic. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a little electronic device, just like a little thing you hold in your hand, and I don't know, it does something, it vibrates the strings or something. I don't know. It's amazing. Um, U2's With or Without You, yeah, Ed
Mhm.
uses an EBow on that one. Um, the next track, Fall in Love with Me, that's my favorite Japan song. It sounds so exciting. It's got killer drums. Then we have Despair, which I think is a gorgeous downer, followed by the moody In Vogue with its withering, wavering synth effects. The next side kicks off with Halloween with its startling drum and bass intro. You remember that? Just boom, boom. It's
Yeah, it's good.
insane. Uh, the sax, the fills, everything sounds amazing. The cover of the Velvet Underground's All Tomorrow's Parties, I think it's a fantastic reinterpretation. Very
Mhm.
different from the original. And what else could you do? You got to take it in a different direction. My buddy Tom from high school, who I idolized, did not like this cover at all. And I can understand why a VU fan might reject it. I think Melanie is right to say that no no VU cover is going to beat the original. And that this is a very special song indeed. But I do love the Japan cover. I think they put their own mark on it. And I just considered every one of these tracks to be excellent. And I feel confident that I would arrive with this as my number one, even if I didn't have so much history with it. It's completely fantastic. I'm giving it 5 stars.
All right, I got nothing on this band.
Well, I think Mick Karn is a standout for me with this band. I like David
Yes,
Sylvian, and I
they
like
have their own identity. They're not just
Mhm.
fucking sponges.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And it's okay to take influence and wear it on your sleeve for a little while and then do something with it. And I think they did. But as a musician, I just think he's so spectacular. He's really the standout. I like David Sylvian's solo work. I really like David's album that he did with Robert Fripp, A New Day. Oh man, that is fantastic. Fripp is on fire on that album, and it's an interesting combination between him and Sylvian. I think Sylvian's voice works perfectly with Fripp's guitar. In fact, Fripp asked David to sing for King Crimson. And
Whoa.
yeah, and Sylvian thought about it for a while. He said, "No, but I would like to work with you as a duo. I'd like to put together something that we could do together. But I don't want to sing for King Crimson. I think he found that daunting, and was a little bit scared off from that. And I can understand that.
Can you imagine though? My God.
Would this have
Yes, I
been,
know, I know, I know, I know.
would this have
Because I
been,
love the album they did together, and they did a live album
The
too. That's
first
really
day,
good.
right? Isn't that what it's called?
Yes, first
Yeah.
day. That's it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's great. It's really good. Sorry,
would he have been joining in place of Baloo or after
I don't
Baloo?
know what Fripp's. Yeah, good question. I don't know what Fripp's intention was. I don't know if Baloo would have been insulted by either taking a backseat role with just guitar and no singing. It's interesting. I don't know. He did not ask. This was after they had done. This was after Crimson had done Discipline, Three of a Perfect Pair, and Beat.
All
So
right.
yeah, I mean it. And they hadn't gotten together for a while. Actually, they were sort
Okay.
of like broken up, right?
Okay.
Because they hadn't done anything together until Thrack,
Yeah, 'cause this was
basically.
still well before then, I would imagine.
Right. This would have been the mid '80s, and that's when the album came out that Sylvian did with Fripp, was in the mid '80s, mid to late
Hmm.
'80s.
Yeah, so probably around that time, I'd imagine.
Yeah, but they make a very interesting combination. Mick Karn, again, Dolly's Car, as Richard mentioned, ended up working with Peter Murphy on that album. They wanted to get back together again, but Mick Karn had cancer, which he died
Mhm.
from, unfortunately. Mick Karn has also done some good solo work, I think, very interesting. It's more instrumental. There's some singing in it, but for the most part, it's more instrumental. But I mean, if you're a bass player and appreciate good bass, Mick Karn is he's God level. Jaco Pastorius is really the only comparison I can think of to Mick, but Jaco was more jazz influenced, obviously, and within the jazz realm. Um, and but both of those guys together, they just make, as fretless bass players go, they're top. They're cream of the crop for sure.
And it's amazing that Richard Barbieri went on to have a long career with Porcupine Tree
Yes, yeah, yeah,
and
because
a
that's
whole
got a
different gig,
yeah
It's
progressive. That's prog rock.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
But that's a testament to, how good a musician he is and how good
again, yeah,
Japan was.
mhm.
yeah.
Well, alrighty then. This was Japan. They're fine. Definitely influential. There you go. I might do another one of these in another 6 months. We'll figure it out.
Influenced and influential. They got the yin and the yang.
Eh, all right. Bye.